August 11th, 2017. This is Greg coming at you from Bowling Green, Kentucky. I delivered here yesterday. I'm just sitting here watching the local high school kids practice. Actually, I just came out of the library. The library is under construction right now for the back half of the library. I don't know if they're expanding it or what. But I was just killing some time today, taking the day off, kind of. My primary phone for Bolt, used for work for Bolt Express off of Straight Talk, doesn't have any service in Kentucky. I told them to call my secondary number, which is a Montana number on my Verizon phone. But only Tyler, one of the newer dispatchers, called me back, and that was only 10 minutes after I called them that and asked them that if they had a load, to give me a call on the other phone because it's Kentucky. Everywhere else I have no problems whatsoever with Straight Talk and Straight Talk even gets better places than Verizon does up in the hills. In some places everywhere, but the state of Kentucky, for some reason, they just do not agree with it. I mean, it's on roam, so you can call out, but it will not get any incoming calls. If I called it off my other phone and to check and call it, it goes directly to voicemail, just as if you had the phone off. I was first on the go after dropping off at a town near here last night, but now when I woke up this morning, I was third in line, and that's most likely because Bolt tried to call. And it sounded like it wasn't available, like the phone was off, went straight to voicemail, so then I cut back to 3, because I'm probably 3 of 3 vans in line there here today, would be my guess, but I'm not really too apt to go into work anyway. I'm tired of kind of just drive and sleep, that kind of thing. One thing about it, Bolt's been running us pretty busy, at least me anyway. Everybody else is having complaints that Bolt is on its slow time or something this week, but for me, I'm doing pretty well. That white stuff right there is, I don't have it with me. I don't even know where I put it. But it's the flea stuff. That's the liquid version of it. But then there's a powder version of it that they eat it, and then it tears up their inside, and it makes them so they can't have eggs. And that's supposed to eventually kill them. I just redid it since I was down. I knew I was going to be down today. It wasn't much of a chance of getting a load. And then you sweep it out after you leave it down for like 24 hours, and then it kills them off for a while. But I have the fleas every now and then come back, and then they don't, and then they come back, and then they don't, and it's because they're laying eggs in the insulation, most likely, or down in the seats or someplace. They're pretty good at keeping their eggs where the eggs will carry on, like any other species, and out of the way of, spray killers and everything else. And this van's been sprayed with about every kind of chemical you can take, and then I switched from hard chemicals that are slowly poisoning me to this pet-friendly stuff that's oils that don't affect you. It's just... and it does just as good of a job on fleas. But that's another reason for wanting to change up my lifestyle. Not that expediting's bad by any means, that just because I'm having this kind of experience in it doesn't mean that you're gonna, if you come out here and do it. I highly recommend you come out here and try it for yourself and see, because it is something else being self-employed. Your hours are your own hours and stuff like that, for the most part, and you get to see the country. I've seen a hell of a lot of eastern United States that in a fast period of time that I wouldn't have gotten to see on my own, traveling out there pennies a day, doing it like I was doing before. You have to go at a lot slower pace. You'd have to maybe make 100 miles a day, because that costs $10 at a shot for 100 miles down the road in gas. Every single day that you do that adds up real quick. So, but with expediting, you could be in Kentucky one day, and Wisconsin the next, and Maine the next, if you pushed all the way through the night, and Florida the next, and it's just all over the place. Which, don't get me wrong, I love doing for a while, but it's time for a break. But I love it in general. The job, but just like anything else, is getting... it's not bad, it's not great. I don't know, it depends. But the main reason I was making this update today was to let you know I'm headed to Kentucky Downs to spend $20 gambling and chill for the rest of the night anyway, and then call them up again on tomorrow. But I'm not in a real hurry to get work from Bolt, because they've kept me pretty busy for the last 3 weeks. Therefore, I have a little over like 600 and something saved now, but then I have incoming checks, or about 1,500 worth of each of the next 3 weeks worth of incoming checks. So technically, if I didn't count on the road expenses, I have 2,000 saved up already with money coming to me, and then I have 3 more weeks to make more money. So I'm not in a huge rush to just go and get money anymore, because I have what I projected to be in within a $2,000 or $3,000 range when I'm done here, saved up. And I'm partially it's not a very good idea to put restrictions on yourself, like I was saying in my other video of, driving under 300 loaded miles in a day or whatever, that you won't take over a load unless it goes over 300 loaded miles, etc. Or you won't go into this state, or you won't go into that state, depending on where that's at and the time and frame and how your company is doing that you're working for. That may or may not be the case that it's a good thing or a bad thing to do. If you're ahead, like I am for this next 3 weeks worth, and I can afford to do so, I'm tempted to tell Bolt to put in the driver comments section that not to bother calling me for loads unless the loaded miles are over 300 at a shot, because it's just not worth my time. I've done a lot of these smaller loads, and I do it at a courtesy to Bolt because they have a hard time covering the shorter loads. Nobody wants to do it. But the idea is, you scratch each other's back, so to speak. You get a couple short loads in one day, and then you do a nice long load, and vice versa. But it seems like a trend that once they find out that you'll do the short loads, the miles start getting less and less, and the pay starts getting less and less, and then those short loads tend to be more time consuming. It might take an hour or two at each point, at both the shipper and the receiver. And by the end of the time that you add in the couple hours it takes to drive the 200 miles, and then the 2 hours in each are either in waiting for the load to get unloaded and reloaded and jumping through all the little hoops they need for these short loads, because they're specialized little loads. They're not the auto factories. By the time you do all that, it's not worth it for the amount of pay. You add everything up, especially when you're a driver for an owner. It's just really not worth messing with. I'd much rather have a 300 loaded miles run, because at least you have a good chance that they're an auto dealership factory sending it then, or auto parts. That's weird. That's just plain weird. But anyway, the idea being that if you go drive above 300 loaded miles, it would most likely be these auto factories and these regular big-time factory customers that Bolt has on. And then when you have those ones, they kind of got their act together. They kind of got their stuff together, both at the shipper and the receiver. It's just that you can get an appointment both sides, show up, get it loaded, sign the paperwork like it's supposed to be, and gone. These shorter runs, they end up being individual runs that they're just cover, just a new customer to Bolt or whoever. Like the airport the other day at the O'Hare National Airport was a specialty type of thingy, and I ended up hauling a mummy down to southern Illinois to a museum, but I had to wait in line with a bunch of cadaver drivers literally picking up fresh dead bodies off of the same airplane. So of course my freight stunk like dead bodies. Stunk so bad that when I opened the doors at the receiver, they're like, holy did you pick up a fresh one instead of a 1,000-year-old mummy or whatever the hell? And it's just, I don't need the smell of dead bodies in my van. I don't need the having to pay $50 up front at the airport gate to get the secured load out. That the Bolt or somebody, that might have been an honest mistake on Bolt's part that they didn't read the fine print of the load or whatever. But I kind of tend to think that whoever dispatched that knew that Bolt wouldn't cover it unless the driver bitched and complained about it, and then on purpose left that little $50 fee thing on the notes that they sent over. And I got to reading it, and I was like, hey, for one thing, the deadhead's a lot more than it said it was going to be, and for another, they want me to pay $50 at the gate to get the load? No, not unless Bolt's going to reimburse me on that. That's just stupid. I would have to literally donate all the money that I made, because we're only making $50 or $100 at a shot on these little 200-mile runs anyway to begin with, and then they want you to pay for the stuff? I'm like, I never had to do that before, and I had known that I would not contract to it, and they didn't say nothing about it in the phone call. They went back and heard the recorded phone call that we made an agreement on, and then Bolt reimbursed me for it, and nobody will admit whether it was an actual mistake or they just tried to pass that on to the driver so the Bolt and the dispatchers and everything didn't have to cover it or what. But it's little things like that that make you think, hey, worth it to take these short runs. They're gonna jerk drivers around like that or screw people over or whatever. It's just not worth it. Go find some other dumb driver that'll do it. So, because of what happened with that last week, and the fact that I'm in a physical financial situation that I can literally afford to sit for the next 3 weeks if I had to, and not run but maybe one load a week or whatever, to pay the fees, Bolt's fees for the week, comm data fees and stuff I'm talking about, or insurance and stuff like that. It's $55 or it's $95 a week, but it's split, so it's like $50 or $55. Driver and the owner split. But aside from doing that each week, so that's not costing me money out of the paychecks coming to me. I can actually afford to just sit if I watch my spending on my food and stuff. Obviously, I want to keep on working, but that's why I drive all day and all night for these short little runs that keep you up all day, all night, and then they don't pay like a over 300-mile run would. But at the same time, if you take a 800-mile run, let's say they give you, if you go too long on the runs, 800 or more miles, they tend to make less pay per mile. You know, instead of getting $1 a mile, you're down to like 82 cents a mile, or sometimes 73 cents a mile, whatever you're willing to take to get there. And then you have to negotiate like hell to get a little bit back on deadhead, the cost of gas to get back out of wherever they send you if it's outside of Bolt's core. So honestly, the right place that you want to be as a business guy, at least driving for Bolt, is somewhere between 300 and probably 800 miles. So roughly probably hit a good average of 500 miles a day, loaded miles a day I'm talking. So most likely averaging 700 miles a day that you're actually driving, 500 of which is loaded paid miles. And then you roughly 200 of worth of deadhead for the different loads that you have to get, or one load or 2 loads or 3 loads in a day to get that miles or what. You just throw in, you know, roughly that you'll be driving 700 miles a day on the good busy weeks. And that'd be a good way to keep it, you know, not take too long of loads that just make you drive. Because everybody says that's where the money's at, and yeah, technically speaking, but the longer and longer the loads are, the less they pay, because they know that they can get other drivers to take it for cheaper. Because everybody wants those long loads, versus hardly anybody wants these short loads because of the headaches that come with them. But they pay like $1 a mile, sometimes they pay $1.20 a mile. And depending on the type of load that it is, and if it's dropping off and picking up in Bolt's core area, I was fine with taking it, and I actually stayed pretty busy. I'd take 2 or 3 loads a day all week long and make more than someone going down to Texas on one load. 1,400-mile run down to Texas, make as much or just a little bit more than them, because they sat in Texas all the rest of the week. And the radar I'm talking about. And I did pretty well on driving all these short runs, because I was just like, as long as you give me 2 or 3 of these short runs a day, you know, it'll make up to like 500 or 600 loaded miles in a day, then it all adds up the same. It's a little bit more headache on my part, but I'm fine with doing the rest of the paperwork, and sometimes I am, but at the same time, especially if they only give you one 200-mile run that day that takes 4 hours, and then 2 or 3 of those hours are just headaches of waiting and jumping through the little hoops that shippers and receivers want. I'm to this point where I'm just going to say, if you don't give me 300 miles, loaded miles on the run, then it's just not worth my time. Little hard to do that though too, and you'll still try to stay in Bolt's core area, because in that you might be screwing yourself if they try to give you longer loads than that, because you'll end up going a little bit out on the far edges of Bolt's core. Especially being here in Kentucky, I can't really place that in there right now, because Kentucky's in Indiana and the top of Tennessee, and kind of that general area is kind of the middle of Bolt's core. So if you tell them you won't take under 300 miles, they give you something that's over 300 miles, most likely it's going to be out past southern Illinois into Iowa, or down way into the southern states that aren't covered, or way over in the Carolinas where you're stuck in the hills with reception problems and gas, and prices are through the roof, and those tiny crowds and everything. And so right now, while I sit in Kentucky, I'm not going to push the issue too much on short runs. Get a short run to Tennessee, and then I get a Tennessee to Michigan or something. That'd be nice. Get back on that I-65 corridor route. I could stand to do that and make some decent money. But otherwise, that's where I'm at this week. This video's getting longer than I expected it to, at 14 minutes in. So, like and subscribe, leave comments, and I'll get this uploaded at Kentucky Downs Casino, there in the border of Kentucky and Tennessee, if they have internet Wi-Fi, which I'm pretty sure they do, I would hope. But we'll go find out. I've always wanted to stop by there and never had the time, because Bolt always loads me up right when I pull in there. They're like, Franklin, Kentucky? There you go. Bye-bye. And that's probably what will happen to me again tonight, just because I'm trying to make plans. But I'm okay with that, too, if they give me a decent run. So, like and subscribe, leave comments, and we'll catch you on the flip. Peace.